Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Hello and welcome everyone back to the Life and Happiness Podcast run by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Steven Solorzano, and let's get back into this one. First, I gotta apologize about if there's any background noise in this one. I had to make a new setup for today, again, and well, there are noises going around me. I'll do my best to make sure you can't hear them in post, but I just want to let you guys all know from the beginning about that. And if I may sound a little bit more muted today, it's because, I'm also trying not to be as loud myself, to not, I guess, not to add a little bit more extra noise around to the surroundings, you know? We'll see how this goes. I think it won't be that bad. So, what's the most interesting thing in the news today? Well, what I find it to be is today's the Derek Chauvin trial, opening statements and all that. And, well, I don't know what to expect. My only hope is that, the violence that we saw in the summers of 2020 doesn't happen again. That's all I'm hoping for. I haven't mentioned this on the podcast yet, but last year I went out to go report on some of those areas, and specifically out to Oakland, and I saw the destruction to a lot of businesses and a lot of families that worked in those businesses. And, I spoke with them, and, it's a little bit terrifying, when you're just doing your job, and then all of a sudden people break through, like through force, through the windows, and just start taking. Hearing their stories and seeing the emotions on their faces was eye-opening for me. So I hope that kind of stuff doesn't happen again. At least that's what I'm hoping and praying for. We'll see what happens. Alright, so the subject matter for this episode today is, basically about siblings. My question today for you all is, do you guys have brothers and sisters? Are you the older one, the younger, in the middle? Because I think that all changes the dynamics of those relationships. But how do I want to put it? I come at it from an angle where I'm an older brother, and that's taught me a lot of different things that I don't know if I would have learned in any other way. And I think the relationships that you can have between brothers and sisters might be the third strongest type of relationship you can form. I only think two beat it out, and that would be parents and then, your life partner. So I do think it's important for people to really come to understand, especially if you don't have any siblings. It'll help you to understand people that do have siblings and the types of ways they may be different. And not in every case, because, we speak in general relations all the time in these episodes, but because, that's the only way we really can speak about things. If you want to talk about every single case possible, then, there wouldn't be enough time to fit it into any show. And, that's why it helps kind of just get to the bottom of these ideas, how to understand them. So, what do I mean by it's one of the strongest relationships you can form? Well, because one of the things I've talked about in other episodes is the bond between a parent and a child, where it's the little one doesn't know anything. All it knows is that it has two parents hopefully it has those two parents, and they take care of it. And those are the role models. Those are the ones that little thing learns from every single day. He's copying them, messing with them, trying to figure out how this being human kind of thing works. And I think for the most part, at that age, kids only have love for their parents. And I think it's a similar thing for younger siblings to older siblings. Especially because, they're a lot closer in age. They're a lot more familiar in ways that parents aren't. But that also makes it a lot more informal, You can do the things which you can't do in front of your parents, but you can do them in front of your brothers and sisters. And you do idolize them too as heroes. I've definitely seen that from my own little sister. And, well, let's go on more to the what is it like being the older sibling? Because the other thing I think it does is foster responsibility. Because not only are you the first one, they're the one in charge, always. If something is to happen, it all comes down on your shoulders. You're also the model. You're like the model that your parents set out to be that for your other siblings. And of course, it's a choice whether or not you listen to it or not. But that's what the role set before you is. And it's a very important role. It reminds me of, I think I mentioned, I forget which number it is, but one of the commandments is honor your mother and father. And so conversely, that is mothers and fathers should act honorably. And I do think that applies to us as older siblings. It's our job to really be that guiding rock for our younger ones. Make sure they're okay when things are bad, because I don't know about you, but more often than not, I think it's easier to open up to a sibling than it is to open up to a parent. It's a very important role that we play. You also teach them all the time. So that's the main gist I'm thinking of in regards to what it's like being an older sibling. And it's not the only place you can kind of form it. It's something which applies to whenever you're kind of in a leadership role with anyone your own age, especially growing up. What comes to mind right now is think about the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts. It's the way they work. I remember the reason why I know this is someone I dated went long detail about all this kind of stuff. And the ones who have been in the troop longer, they're the role models for all the ones who were just entered. And the ones who just entered are like the babies. They're the younger siblings. They're the new ones with all this potential, who haven't shown what they can do yet, but have so much room to grow. And it's almost your job as a person in charge to foster that path, to see where the talents are and set them up for success to go on and be that person they know they could be. And, well, it's another thing. It's one thing to be able to have that responsibility, and the other thing is to be able to succeed at it. Like, when you do, it's a gratifying feeling like no other. Someone you train, someone you put time and effort to, and you see them flower, you see them blossom. The closest thing that I have like that would be with my own sister, and also with Science Olympiad, where I was the captain. I was in charge of 30-ish people. And, your goal is to foster the youth, make sure they carry the torch for the next years to go on, because your time's going to be up, It will be their time to shine, and you just got to set up the path for them so that they can do it, and they will do it once you're gone. And in a nutshell, that's kind of the role of the parents and the younger and older siblings. And a big reason why I think it's a great thing to do as the oldest sibling to foster that relationship is because, you know what? Most likely, your parents are going to die before you guys. I don't know about you all, but my parents are not that much, they're pretty young for parents. So we'll have them for a long time. But I have friends whose parents have already passed away and they're just in their early 20s. I have friends who their parents are well into their 60s or into their 50s, heck, some into their 70s. And, well, since we're only in our 20s, we're not going to be able to survive long into adulthood with them here with us. That's the sad kind of truth about it. So, that's why I think it's important, especially as the older sibling, to be able to have that bond with your younger siblings so that through any decade you all are with together, you're all you can rely on one another. My mom describes it all the time between her and her sister, that aside from my dad, that's her best friend. Aside from my dad and their mom, my grandmother, those are especially close. And I guess, this is the thing which separates family from friendship, and just why, even though you can have great friendships, if you can have great friendships with your family, I think it rises to an even higher place, you know? The reason being, and this is the sad part, friends end up living their own lives. And because they're not connected to you by blood, a lot of the events that you go to won't be the same. You won't have those same kind of obligations. And yeah, you can invite each other, and there are very good relationships like that. But it's different to be able to have that same bond with a brother or a parent, because you see them all the time. You go visit them, you have to go attend to their birthdays, and the reason why you have to is because they're by blood. That's why we do it, but there's something deeper to it as well. And I think a big reason what supports this kind of statement is we all know how much it sucks when we don't have those bonds with our family. How empty it feels. How it's almost like a feeling like we don't belong. We always end up looking for family anywhere else. And you know what? Even though you can find it, it's very hard to, for the reason that blood bond will make a lot of people go well out of the way for you, that it's hard to find people out there who won't do that. Who will actually do that, my bad. They aren't there. They are there, and they're amazing people. But it's not very common. Like, what comes to mind is like mothers, the stories of mothers lifting cars off of babies so that they can actually, get, get their babies home and safe. That's the best way I can put it. Or the stories of fathers standing out there to protect their families. Or even brothers and sisters. It's a crazy kind of thing what family members will do for each other. And if you've ever seen like little kid siblings, it's a big strain on the older ones. The older one has to grow up faster. The older one has to give up a part of their childhood in order to be that responsible person for everyone below them. And you know what? Partly that sucks. And that's one of the things that only children don't really have a harder time understanding if they never are put in the same type of leadership type scenario. But it's something intrinsic to the role. And it goes wrong a lot of the time. Some people can't really handle or don't believe in their ability to handle that responsibility, so they give up. Some people let their negative emotions cloud their judgment or get ahead of what they should do, what they know to be right. And some people just get jealous, because you know what? Younger siblings get more attention. We lose that once we're not the baby of the family anymore. But those are things you all have to deal with. And being the older type sibling, it's an important role to play, and you can do so much good. You can help them succeed so much if you really apply to yourself in the way that you ought to. And by ought, I mean, your conscience will be what's telling you to do it. And you know what? There are many reasons for you not to listen. Many reasons where you could just say, no, I'm not going to do it. It takes a lot of effort. Why are you going to waste my time doing it? But that part of you is going to hold you accountable. It eats away at you when you're not being that person that you should be. And I've talked about this before, when you're listening to the potential within you, and when you're not living up to it, or at least not on the path of it. And this is one of those things as well. So, yeah, I can't think of any more that I want to elaborate on the older brother. Next segment will go into middle children, because those are very interesting. And then, finally, on the last segment 4, we're going to go with 7 reasons you should talk to a sibling that you haven't talked to in a while. All right, I'll see you guys soon, and we'll continue this all in the next segment.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello and welcome everyone back to the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast. I am your host, Steven Solorzano, and let's get back into this one. Have you guys seen Jordan's episodes yet? I'm curious what you all think of how she does it differently than I do. I wonder what you all prefer, what you like from both. That'd be interesting to hear. Anyways, so let's get back into the subject matter, and don't forget, segment 4 is 7 reasons why you should talk to a sibling that you really haven't had that much of a relationship, basically. Like 7 reasons why I should talk to a long-lost sibling. So, this segment is going to be about mainly the middle child, the differences between the older and the younger, and also why this is usually one of the more hated ones. Because, think about it. You lose the, how would you put it? The wonder of being the younger, the baby, because you've all seen it. It's all in our shows, it's all in our stories. It's where the youngest one is babied by everyone. The youngest one gets all the attention. And the middle one doesn't have the same responsibility that the older one does. They do get some, but it's not the same. So they lose a big part of their identity in doing all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of important to understand about for the middle child specifically. Because what it deals with the most is this loss of identity. That's what I would describe it as. And well, I think one thing which describes it the most well is a historical example. So, in the olden days, kings would have many children that would go up anywhere from 2 to 10 to 12. And the first one is the one that would get the crown. The second one probably would go into the army. And the third would go into maybe the clergy. But everyone else down would have nothing, really. And you almost lose your sense of identity of what your role is supposed to be. Think about it. If you're not just, if it's more than just 3 kids, let's say there's 6 kids. What's 2 through 5 supposed to be? What role are they supposed to play? you lose your significance because you're not the head and you're not the baby, which are the most, how would I put it, desired positions in the family. So many people can take it different ways. I've seen some middle children vie for attention really hard. They compete with their younger sibling to get the attention of the older siblings, and and of the parents as well. I've seen middle siblings retreat to stay away from the family. And what else have I seen? Trying to remember, and if there's any other variation of this. Others just kind of acclimate to the role. They decide they want to be the number two. Like, they'll be the right-hand man to the older sibling, and will help them out in whatever ways they can. And also, it's interesting, the dynamic changes depending on whether or not they're boys or girls. Because, well, let's see how to put it. When the first one is a boy and the second one is a girl, and they have a bunch of other siblings below them, they both kind of take charge in different ways, kind of the way the parents do. Older brothers, and of course this can apply to older sisters, but I've seen it more commonly in older brothers, is they're the one that take charge. They push younger siblings to do newer and crazier things. And also, get everyone to do the more uncomfortable thing. Kind of, push them in that way. Versus, oh God, you don't mess with an older sister. Because they're kind of almost as bad as mothers. Their younger siblings are essentially their babies, and they will hurt you if you hurt them. And, well, it's kind of an amazing thing to see. They're scary in that way, and that's in a different way than how older brothers work. But also, older sisters are kind of the caring one. So if you're in that role, if you're number two and you're the brother, if you're a brother and the older one is a sister, or the other way around, there is a role there for you. But once you step more into that middle of the pack kind of vibe, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you're not the baby, it's just not a fun time. You kind of just, your relationship with everyone else is less dependent on, that responsibility or a baby type thing. It's more of, what role do you fill? And let's see, what comes to mind about this is so here's one dynamic between 4 brothers. The oldest one obviously took the leadership type role. He's the most serious one. He's the one who tries to keep everyone in and following the right thing to do, and is also their fiercest fighter. He'll do anything to protect his siblings, no matter what, his brothers. Number 2 wants to be number 1, so he's always competing with number 1. And he's angry and brash. But he's also, he's not the life for them. He's more like their fire. When they need a light, he's the one to bring it. Number 3, because he has no chance of being number 2 or number 1, he kind of does his own thing, and he supplies something to everyone else, which the rest don't have. He's the brains of the group. That's how you could put it. He excels in an area where the others don't, which is he knows a lot more scientific type things, and whenever the others have questions in regards to any of that, he's the one ready and there to help. And the final one, the baby, he's the one that jokes around. He's the soul of the group. Because I was thinking of soul for number 2, but that doesn't apply. The baby, the youngest one, is the one that kind of does that kind of thing. Because no one gets angry at them. Everyone loves them because they're the youngest one. They're the spoiled one. They're the one that everyone wants to take care of because everyone sees them in that role, even the older siblings. And of course, this is an ideal one. There are issues and problems which develop, but overall, these are siblings which do try to be good siblings. That's the way I would put it. Because, there's also, think about it like, let me take it the example that I said of like the number one, number two butting heads. But now I'm going to go bring it to the story of Lion King. Because, well, Scar is a brother, right? Scar is the brother of Mufasa. But because he is number two, all the spoils go to number one because of his birthright. And, well, instead of forging his own path, Scar becomes bitter and then seeks to kill his brother and even his family just because he wants that position. And, that doesn't happen all the time in real life, but it does happen. If I remember correctly, there's another family I know who, when one of the great-grandparents passed away, all the grandparents were squabbling over who got what, and it was the material things which they were jealous over that their relationships kind of frayed after that point. Because the converse of the good that I've been talking about of how sibling relationships should be is how terrible they can be. Because you know what? Another thing about family is, well, everyone's intimate secrets. You're around them. You see them in their embarrassing moments. You're forced to spend time with them for years. And you know what? That may go well, that may go wrong, but knowing that much about someone gives them power over you, whether you like it or not. It reminds me of this idea in Aragon. I don't know if any of you read that series, where it's even learned someone's true name. Basically, if you understand someone, who they are to their core, then you can control them. Words have power, which is true. And, well, so actually here I have a good example. So in this specific family, I was saying there are 6 brothers and sisters. I forget how many of each. But yeah, the parent passed away and they're all squabbling for it. And now whenever they get in contact with one another, the issues over who gets what are what dominate the conversation. It's just bitter and jealous and splits families apart. And that has some intended effects, some non-intended effects. The sad thing was when families rift apart is, well, you lose a sense of identity. I think the main sense of identities which you get as a kid are your family, and then it's the place you live, so your country, that kind of pride. And that goes from nation size all the way down to city size. There's pride in those kinds of things. And then the last thing would be what you believe, what makes the way you live you. And you can describe that as religion, you can describe that as culture, but there's a lot wrapped up into that. And then, but family's a big one. That's why imagine orphan kids, what they have to deal with, not having the first one, family. And the thing is, when you don't have family, you're much less likely to understand or receive that community identity which comes with the place that you live and the values that you stand for. A lot of orphan kids end up kind of aimless, And another thing with that is, well, we like to think of our society as an individualistic society, but that's not true. The basic unit of our society as it stands is the family. And you know what? Parents have a lot of big role they play in it, but all these siblings can make a big impact in making it all smooth over and making it so that families can continue on. And especially, like I said, once the parents go away, that it's the siblings sticking together which allow the family to continue strong. And what comes to mind, for an example like this, is the 12 tribes of Israel. So biblical literacy is very low in the United States as of now, so I will go over the story just a short little bit. Basically, Israel, or Jacob, is the, the progenitor of the Jewish race. He had 12 children, different mothers, not all of them different mothers, some with some mother, some others with another mother. And it's a long, complicated story. But it's those brothers sticking together throughout, well, first, their issues out in Palestine. No, what's the region? The best way to describe it. I forgot the exact term, but think about it as, well, the region where Israel is. There is a specific name for the region. It's not coming to me at the moment. So, the first is issues there with famine, and 11 of the brothers are sticking together there. And then another one is in Egypt. And the rest of the story goes with how those brothers rebond again, and they stick together through the tribulations that they go through in Egypt. And their connections were so well rooted that I think it's 200 or 400 years later, the descendants of each of the 12 brothers all form their own kind of clans, their own tribes, but they still interact and share the same culture, same values. A literal nation was birthed from one man and all his kids having that strong family bond and really sticking to it across the generations. And that's an amazing kind of idea. Like, think about that. Like, I think the most common thing we understand like that today is how, I forget the percentage, but a good percentage of the population is supposed to be descended from Genghis Khan. But that's just, that even that doesn't compare to this, because that's just people having genes from him versus a whole people that we know today essentially descend from one person and those siblings, which kept those ties together despite being from different mothers. And I think that's an incredibly powerful thing. Like, think about that. Like, if you somehow aimed at the right kind of path, that who knows what could happen from just one person, what all the events, all the things would result from their actions and their children afterwards. That's an amazing kind of idea. So yeah, so I just finished exploring my thoughts on middle children, what they do, the issues, and the challenges they face separate from older children specifically. Next segment, we'll go into younger children. And don't forget, the last segment today is going to be on the 7 reasons why you should talk to a sibling which you really don't have a strong relationship with. All right, we'll see you guys in the next one.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello and welcome back to this next segment of the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast. And like I said, run by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today you're all with me, Steven Solorzano, and let's continue on with the subject matter at hand. So we've been talking all day about siblings, the way their relationships work, why they're important, why they go wrong. And this segment's going to focus on the younger, the baby of the family. So, all of you who are older siblings, we all knew what this was like. This was our first few moments of glory. Because when you're the new one that entered the world, you have no responsibility. You don't have anything to anyone. You're just kind of there. And it's everyone else's responsibility to take care of you. And all this attention and love focus on you. And this is an interesting thing, and when you look at IQ scores, which are not set in stone, by the way. You're not born stupid. You can work on it. You can grow. You can improve. A lot of it is based on essentially nurture. And for the reason which I'll cite is that the IQs of the oldest child and only children are higher on average than that of younger children and twins, especially, like identical twins. And because the main reason is attention gets split apart. So when you're the younger, you know that you take all the attention away from everyone else. It's all focused on you. And, well, that goes lots of different ways. Some become appreciative. I've met those. They're really sweet. I actually dated one like that. She was one of the sweetest people I know. And the way she took that role was because of that part of her past, she always wanted to give that same kind of care in return. That's the way she took it. She was the mediator. She was the one who, whenever she met someone new, she always found something to compliment them on. And that's amazing. Like, that's something actually is pretty rare. And I've met lots of people so far, and that's not something common. That is, it's hard to even get, like, people you know to compliment you. So when she does it for something new, that's something special. Anyways, but that's one way you can take it. And the other way, I'm sure many of you have seen, is, they're spoiled. They're super spoiled, and they act like it. You know, the ones which, because they get all the attention, they get whatever they want it from everyone, and it doesn't matter who you are. This actually encountered this with the sibling of another person I was with. So she was this really tiny thing, and this interesting thing about her is she was brilliant. Like, for a little girl, she was super smart, and she knew it. She was aware of her ability to get people to do what she wanted, and so she abused it so much. Oh my God, that was an interesting time. She would cry to get what she wanted. She would yell. She would fight because it worked. The interesting thing is she knew she couldn't do that with me. She knew I wouldn't take it. One look from me and she would stop. But that was only when it was just us. When someone else was there, she knew she could appeal to them, so she would act that way. And it was interesting. But you guys all know those kinds of people. And even the ones that just don't stop for anyone, the ones who are so self-entitled. So that's one issue where it can go wrong. Actually, I was going to mention this I didn't mention this when I was going over the story of Jacob and Israel. Because the main part of the story is Jacob's favorite son was the youngest one. Because the youngest was also the only child he had with the woman he loved, whose name was Rachel. If I remember correctly, it was Rachel. And he was, so it's not just that it was the newest kid, it was also that other little wrinkle that of all his kids, that was the only one that he got from his first wife. Interesting story, he got married to people at once, basically, by a ruse. Anyways, so he's lavishing all this attention on Joseph, and Joseph knows this, and he's a little dumb. He's either a little dumb or a little conceited, and he's talking about this, and it's how obvious it is with his brothers, and it gets them jealous, gets them angry at him, and it gets Joseph thrown into a pit with snakes and sold into slavery. The Bible's crazy stories. I'd recommend reading it just for it's a good read. Well, at the very least, it's a good read. But yeah, because he knew he was getting attention, and he also would get dreams that he would lord himself over the other brothers, and he would tell them about this kind of stuff. Well, the other brothers didn't take kindly to that kind of thing. Like, it's one that, like, okay, the younger one knows you're getting this attention, and, well, we're doing it willingly, and he's appreciative of it. It's another thing where, he's getting all the attention, We stopped giving him attention because of this, and then now he's lording his position over the rest of us. That's just a way to make people angry at you. It's just a way to build enemies. And it's, well, what? See, I'm not in that position, so it's hard for me to say. Well, it's also, well, another thing that I've noticed, which actually just applies to the middle child as well. It's like, what I've seen is more of, if the older brothers are successful, especially the oldest one, it's like, how can I follow that act? Now, imagine if just, you're the younger one, and you just have an older brother. It's just you two. That one's maybe more believable. Let's say you have like 8 brothers and sisters, and they're all successful, and you're number 9. How are you going to live up to that? That's another wrinkle in that. It's like, these are all the success stories of my parents above, and, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to reach that level? And there's also the converse. Sometimes you just have a bad situation. Your brothers and sisters aren't doing well, and, well, it makes life a living hell. And you have to deal with that at the younger one, and you don't get that kind of attention. You have to grow up really fast. And, well, it's different in that position. Because when your older brothers and older sisters are struggling, when you're young, you still want to look up to them. You want them to do well. You want them to be your hero. But when it becomes painfully obvious that they're not living up to that kind of vision that you have, well, it makes, from what I've seen from the people I know in those kind of situations, it hurts. It hurts a lot. And I guess this goes hand in hand with some of the things I've mentioned on love. It's when you really care about people, when you have love for them in your heart, it pains you to see them not succeeding. It pains you to see them struggling. It pains you to know that they're in pain. Actually, an interesting idea. I don't know if any of you have seen The Last Ronin, which is a new comic coming out by IDW about the Ninja Turtles. And it kind of explores this idea with the youngest one, Michelangelo, whereas it's a future where all his brothers were killed. And the life he's living now is as a vessel for all their failures, all embodied through him. And he sees their ghosts all the time. And that's an interesting idea, because I think it does apply in the real world. Now, what comes to mind is the history of blood feuds in families. So, like, I don't know if any of you guys have seen Hatfields and McCoys. That's a famous blood feud in the United States. I forgot how many years ago, but well over 100 now. At least I'm pretty sure. In that, well, this may apply for anyone in the family, but sometimes the legacy of the family can just drop all onto your doorstep. And I think initially it applies to the older brother, whatever scenario, but if something happens to the rest of them, it goes on to the next one to kind of figure it out. I was actually one of the projects I'm working on. It deals with this kind of issue where, so if you go into statistics of inner cities, I would urge you to look at the FBI statistics for murder rates and go by group. Because an interesting thing you'll find is for Hispanic and Black youths in inner cities, not only is, well, dropout rates of school high, but the number one reason for the cause of death at those ages is murder. And it's done by other kids of the same colors and ages because of gang violence and stuff. So you see a lot of times where, you know what, you may have had those good brothers in front of you, but they're at the wrong place at the wrong time, and you know what, now you're the one in charge. Now you're the one responsible for the family. And this same kind of thing happens when the father, for some reason, is not there. Or even the mother. I've seen it both ways, where it's a single mother, and the oldest brother is stepping up into that role of, I gotta provide for my family. for my mom and my brothers and sisters. And then I've also seen the opposite, where it's a single father and the oldest sister takes in that role of, I gotta make sure I take care of everyone, make sure they're okay, make sure they're prepared. And those are interesting kind of dynamics where responsibility shifts and just forces everyone to age up. And younger ones are interesting, because if all goes well, they're the ones without that responsibility. And everyone has walked paths before them, so they have the easiest time of learning what they could. They can learn from many mistakes, basically. Many mistakes have already been made, and that knowledge is ready to pass on to the youngest one. But I've also seen where the youngest one steps up to the plate and rises up where older brothers have failed, older sisters have failed, and the middle children aren't doing so hot either. So it's an interesting kind of thing. So I think it's like, in the worst scenarios, the younger one has it the hardest. And in the best scenarios, the older one has it the hardest, because they have to take care of everyone else. And the middle children are an interesting mix. It varies on what happens and with the issues with the family specifically, because everyone has different things, different details, which alter these nuances for everyone. But I do think the basic rules should be understood, because then from there you can explore the details. It's just like a framework, basically, you know? You have the idea, and then there's a difference between having the idea, the concept, and then applying the concept. Yeah, that seems about right. And then I think specifically for the youngest one, I think the role of the youngest is kind of to keep everyone together, because that's the thing everyone kind of agrees on is a good thing. That's the baby. He's the one that makes everyone smile, cheers everyone up. But we'll see. I'm really curious to all your thoughts on this. The hardest one for me definitely to identify with is the younger one, because that's never been a role I've really been in, basically. I don't really get babied. I've always been in that leadership type role outside of the family, and then in my own family, I'm the oldest one in my generation and the oldest one out of my siblings, which is just one. And then whenever I've gone on teams or whatever groups, I'm always one that rises up to lead others instead of being babied by the ones already in charge. I always had to prove myself. So it's not something I understand well. But I would like your thoughts on this. I want to see what you all think. And remember, in the next segment, we're going to get into 7 reasons why you should communicate with your siblings, why you should build those relationships. And you know what? It's, like I said, who knows, if you manage to build those bonds extremely well, hey, maybe you guys will be the next Jewish nation, basically. And I don't know, it's a crazy idea. I wonder what will happen with all this. And you know what? I'm one who plans on having a lot of kids, so at least for me, it's important to understand what these roles are so I know how to best treat my own kids, you know? So we'll continue this all into the next segment, and I'll see you all soon.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast. This is your host, Steven Solorzano. The whole theme today has been about siblings, basically. What these relationships are like, why they're important, and the different nuances which affect how the whole relationship works. We talked about the focus from the lens of an older, a middle, and younger sibling. And finally, this segment is for all you who have siblings but don't have strong relationships with them. I want to reiterate 7 reasons why I think it's a good idea to reach out to them, to talk to them. And this could be at any age. It could be while you're still growing up. It could be when you're old. It's a good thing, I think, to have as a whole. And let's not mince words. Let's get right into it. Number 1 is they can be really close friends. Closer friends than you can have in many other situations. And I don't think people really realize that. Or maybe they do. And it's different depending on the situation. So, here's an example. Even though my dad is not one to open up, from when I do talk to my uncle and my aunt, they mention things that, well, he would never open up to me about. Things I know he would have mentioned with my mom. But things which he's comfortable talking to them about because of that bond that they have through being siblings. And you know what? You can evolve it through friendship as well, and clearly. That's an obvious kind of thing. But the main reason what makes it different is friends tend to live different lives. Because, you got your own family and you have your own obligations. It's hard to carve out time for other people, And we all struggle with that. So when you have it through, it's nice when you have it through family bonds as well. And the thing is with siblings is for number 2, they tend to stick around longer than your parents. Hopefully. Well, we'd all hope so, right? God forbid worse would happen, but your grandparents first to go, aunts and uncles, parents, they're next in line, and then it's just you guys. You're the ones who will likely be there the longest with each other. So it's good to have a way so that you just have ways to keep going forward, You have ways to make sure that, everything is going right, and you have someone there who knows you, and not just knows you, from work and knows you 5 years, but this is someone who literally might know you for most of your life. It's very rare that you'll have people like that. So I think it's a good opportunity to take advantage of. Because I make good friends. I have friends who I've been with for many different things. And you know what? Sad part is a lot of them are drifted apart. And not because we're bad friends or anything. It's because, we just live different lives. They went to different colleges. I went to a different college. We now are different circles. And you know what? When we do have a chance, it's good to meet up, catch up, and, the friendship hasn't broken or died. It's just when we ever get back together, it's the same kind of thing. But the difference is how often does that happen, So when family has all those kind of obligations which come together, it's nice to have that kind of bond with someone in those circles. And then, so now for the next reason, this one has to do with the easier to open up kind of thing. Because part of that is not just that you've been with each other so long, is that you literally were in the same situations. They're the only person who can understand your household as well as you did. The negatives and the positives of your parents or maybe your grandparents or whatever familial things that you have. You'll know the same stories. You'll know the same events, the same people. It's easy. You have that background foundation to understand one another. And it just makes it that much easier to open up to someone like that. Because they're familiar, And so the next reason that you should reach out to your siblings and really try to build that kind of relationship is, well, so, I don't know about you guys, but, like, my family, the celebrations I've enjoyed the most is when everyone kind of gets together. We used to do, I remember when I was very little, and, you'd have my uncles and my aunts and my grandparents and all in the same spot. And, like, about 10 of us, and it was really nice to have everyone there. And, it's good to have, well, those kind of things with just your parents or maybe just your siblings, but it's a lot emptier. And it's a lot more festive when you have the whole family kind of getting together. So I think it's another good thing to have for those family-type celebrations, that to have good relationships with your uncle, or with your brothers, or your sisters, and maybe so that their kids can have good relationship with your kids. That's another thing. That's another crazy thing. Like, I'm pretty sure one of my cousin's best friends is my sister whenever they get together. They're so close. And I haven't seen him in a while, and it would be good on me to go and visit, especially while I'm near enough to the area. It's nice to be able to have those bonds. It's more like where it's not a necessity, I think it's just a net plus to be able to foster that, Like, I can't think of any reason why it would be just wrong. It only seems to me like a positive to be able to build that kind of thing. And, well, and then you can have those shared stories for your own kids, for your own grandkids, that can see what makes this family, and why we all stick together, And you know what? Maybe reaching out to them after a while. Maybe this is separate from my list, but this kind of just came to mind. Maybe they've had the same thoughts too, Maybe they thought, hey, I should reach out to this person. It just feels like something I should do. But you don't, because you're busy. You're afraid to make the time for it. You don't know how the conversation will go. You don't know. And it stops you. And if you're having the same thought, if you're having those thoughts, I'm sure they're having the same ones about you. So, usually it just takes one person to start. Reach out, say hi, do something. One person with that spirit, I'm going to take a risk and go for it, see what happens, can create something that you never would have expected. And the best example I always go back to is when you're asking a girl out. As a guy asking a girl out, that kind of thing. Because you don't know where it'll go. And that person could literally be everything you ever wished for. And I think the same kind of thing applies here, where you can form these relationships with your siblings even years after the fact, years after you've left the house, decades since you've talked to each other. You just have to try. And based on the things I've been talking about, I think it's something worth doing. It's good for your grandparents as well, your parents. It pains parents when they see issues with their kids. And especially when they see that their kids don't talk with one another. And especially more if the kids don't talk to them. It's something you don't understand until you're in the situation. And I personally I don't have kids yet. But I've talked with enough people who have these issues to be able to understand a semblance of what these kind of things are like. And, well, we'll see what happens when I get there. But these are things which definitely feel like the right thing to do, Alright, so let me see. Let me get back into the list. Oh, yeah, okay. So, I kind of sped through 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I have to get on to 6. An interesting thing. So here's a biblical idea. And it applies specifically to this. So, within the tribes of Israel, which I mentioned already, they had one of the laws in the Torah was to help each other out financially. Essentially 0 interest loans just to get someone back on their feet. And And that is something that I've seen people kind of just do in families, just to help one another. And if you've closed off any of those, any of those bonds, then you're losing people who would be willing to help you out in your worst situations, you know? Because the thing is, and here's number 7, it's hard to break bonds by blood. As much as we may dislike the idea, and as much as we know that just because someone is your family by blood doesn't mean they're a good person, it doesn't change the fact that family goes well out of the way for you in ways that hardly any other one else will do. And all you have to do is ask. You know, it doesn't feel good to ask. It doesn't feel good to be in a situation where you have to rely on someone else for help. It hurts us to not be independent. But the issue is, we all run into our pitfalls. We all run into rock bottom at some point. We all run into that one thing which will hurt us. And you know what? Sometimes it's not, your family can't handle it alone. Because the thing is about you and your wife or husband, you're on the same boat financially and emotionally and all that. Sometimes you need something outside of you guys to really help pick everything back up together. And family goes a long way for that kind of thing. For me, it was my aunt willing to house me during COVID and all that. And I love her and appreciate her for being able for doing such a thing. And now it was a lot easier for the both of us to be able to go through something like how lockdown was for as many of those months. And, well, that's something which people who have lost their family or never had them to begin with, they understand how lucky we are to have it. Like I said, it's rare that people will go out of your way as a stranger. They're more likely to do it when you're younger. But, as many of you adults out there may know, the world is a harsh one. It's hard to find someone who will look at you and give you a chance, let alone someone who will look at you and give you the care that families tend to give. They're there, they exist, but they're not something you can rely on. Because it's like hitting the jackpot when you find something like that. So, I think the big lesson here is, you know what? Families have issues. They do. Everyone has family issues. But if you foster those relationships, if you make bonds, deep bonds with the ones in your own family, oh, it's such a rich relationship in ways that you would never expect. It might be the thing which saves you when you're at your worst. And you know what? It might be the thing which gives you life near the end. So, yeah, I think that's it. I can't think of any more ideas within this topic that I want to go explore and discuss with you. So I'm curious of what your all thoughts are. I went over each type of sibling, older, middle, younger, and the different details of the situations, you know, how many siblings, what the number of siblings has an effect on, and even a little bit of what the sex of the sibling does, if it's a brother or a sister, and their relationships with one another, the details of basically why it's a good thing to foster those kind of relationships, what makes a sibling type relationship special. So, I really want to hear your thoughts. Comment below, see what you think, because everyone has a different perspective on these specific issues. We all have our different lens in which we see it. And that way we can come closer to some semblance of the truth. And if you like this episode, subscribe on YouTube, give us a like, share. Spreaker, I think you have to give us a good 5-star rating. Same thing on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Yeah, subscribe in there as well. And the best thing you can do is share this video. Let people know. Let's get these ideas going. You know, start that kind of conversation. So, I wish you all the best. And this is Steven Solorzano signing off.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.